How the people are doing. So, man, I've been waiting to make this video for so long. I would have made it much sooner if I could have, but well, crazy things happen. Anyways, regardless, the fact is this. You see, I already have very high expectations from the Xiaomi 15 Ultra because the Xiaomi 14 Ultra had some of the most interesting and really incredible videography features. It wasn't perfect, and that was one of those things, it's inconsistent. That's kind of how Xiaomi flagships have been for a while, but I'm hoping that with all the few improvements we have seen with photography, I'm hoping something like that also happened with videography, in case of the 15 Ultra at least. But you see, the Vivo X200 Pro, now that phone, let's just say it had issues way back when it launched, a whole host of them, mostly revolving around stabilization. Above all else, stabilization was the worst, most problematic issue that we had when the X200 Pro launched. Now, the thing is, I'm really hoping that Vivo has improved upon this because if not, well, it's just gonna be sad. Can you imagine for a fact that the X200 Pro did not even have 4K 60 stabilization? None whatsoever. A 2025 flagship doesn't have stabilization with 4K 60, that's just sad. So let's just say, fingers crossed, that Vivo improved on it, but well, we'll see. I haven't actually checked out the video samples yet, but I'm definitely interested, and I hope you are too, so let's jump in. So finally, a comparison where we're gonna find out if the videography on the X200 Pro is finally worthy of a reckoning. But we're starting off with the selfie videos as usual, and I would say that the selfie video is perhaps, arguably, one of the better ones that we have on the X200 Pro. It's one of those things that doesn't really have a whole lot of problems. There are some, like the lack of proper autofocus, but let's face it, when you compare it against the Xiaomi 15 Ultra, which yes, it does have a wider field of view, and I do like that quite a bit, but the problem is that the way the dynamic range is handled is just not good enough. The way the colors are handled, not quite as nice. The way the noise reduction is nailed on the X200 Pro, way better as opposed to the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. See, these are small fundamentals that really matter and really make a huge difference when it comes to the sheer quality of the video that you're getting out of the X200 Pro, and it is, without question, much higher on the X200 Pro because of that reason. Even though it does have some shortcomings, I think those shortcomings matter less as opposed to the problems that we have on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. But alongside that, we also have the microphone quality, which is good on both, without question, very good. But it's drastically different in the approach because the Xiaomi 15 Ultra, it has a lot of noise reduction going on, which does clarify my voice quite a lot. It doesn't muffle my voice too much, but I would say that if we were in a genuinely windy situation, then actually the X200 Pro's much less processed approach might be more preferable, because usually, at least in terms of professional audio recording, that's my perspective, is that you don't want any built-in effects. You want the audio quality to be as pristine and as untouched as possible, and that is something the X200 Pro provides. Perhaps it's a matter of convenience as well. Maybe you want more processed audio, but well, you guys have the samples, now decide for yourself. But then of course 4K 30 with the rear cameras, this is where the stabilization issue used to exist, and I guess it's improved a little bit because compared to the Xiaomi, which does also have really nice stabilization, it looks fairly similar and it doesn't seem as bad, or at least it doesn't feel as bad as I remember it to be. Now 4K 60 will really tell us the full story here, but with 4K 30, at least as per these video samples, I would say it's pretty good. It's not too shabby at all. Also, you might have noticed that the X200 Pro really likes to finesse with the contrast. It brings out a lot of detail in the midtones just by doing that, and it's something I really like. It's something that I feel adds more value to the video from the X200 Pro. Very small extent, but I guess an argument could be made that the Xiaomi 15 Ultra is actually a much more natural and authentic approach, so to speak, and that's kind of the whole point about the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. It doesn't process much at all. And now we have the ultra-wide cameras. So the ultra-wide cameras are interestingly, I would say, a little bit better on the X200 Pro, simply because the dynamic range is a good bit better as opposed to the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. Now, see, unlike photography where dynamic range is usually handled fairly well, even with the natural approach on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra, I think a lot of areas in the Xiaomi's video is just overexposed, and that in most situations is just not going to work out quite as nicely. Now moving on, of course, we have zoom. So we obviously have a 2x, which is absolutely not worth using, but on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra, I do think that versatility is better because we have optical 3x, which is quite good, as you can probably tell, and also optical 4.3x, which is a brand new sensor, and I have a lot a lot of high expectations for this one in particular, because the Vivo X200 Pro, this one has possibly one of the best telephoto sensors. The 3.7x telephoto already proved itself and it actually pulled ahead, especially with high resolution as opposed to Xiaomi's 4.3x. But in video, things may or may not turn out to be different. But let's be honest, because the Xiaomi just has more optical zoom options, it automatically goes ahead in terms of videography versatility specifically. And then of course we have 4K 60. Would you look at that? It's painful to watch is what it is, because the Vivo X200 Pro still has zero bloody stabilization with 4K 60. It's honestly, I'm speechless at this point. Like, I just thought it might have been something that Vivo forgot to program and they would have fixed it ASAP, but doesn't seem like the case. Apparently 4K 60 in a 2025 flagship unusable because it has no stabilization. How utterly sad is that? This is a huge leg up, by the way, for the Xiaomi 15 Ultra, very simply and obviously, because you can actually walk around with it. And actually, the same goes for the ultra-wide camera as well. Can you imagine that, just taking ultra-wide video, hoping for better stabilization, and with 4K 60, you just don't get the option. Like, it really just drops usability to zero, doesn't it, on the X200 Pro? Now, when it comes to 8K video, I gotta say, the X200 Pro's contrast and the way it handles exposure in general, exceptional. No two ways about it. It's a really good balance that it strikes. But what about stabilization? Well, I would say that you might be slightly surprised about the fact that we actually get reasonably good stabilization with the X200 Pro. I'll say that again for your convenience. Bloody 8K has better stabilization than 4K 60 on the X200 Pro. How is this even legal? Now, on the Xiaomi, I would say in certain challenging lighting situations, I do think the dynamic range was better, and the stabilization, weirdly enough, is not as good as the X200 Pro. I do see a few more jitters here and there. It's like the stabilization is trying to do its job but kind of failing at the same time. But it's not bad. Not nearly as bad as what we saw with 4K 60, at least on the X200 Pro, that is. But then, the Xiaomi 15 Ultra goes quite a few steps further, because we get 8K with every other rear camera that we have over there, including the ultrawide, which is quite nice because the ultrawide, as you can probably tell, stabilization is bloody good. This is without question quite nice to have, but the fact is, are the details gonna be good enough when you're using 8K with the ultrawide camera? We will find out. Also, you can utilize the 3x, which looks bloody good, as you can probably tell, and the same goes for the 4.3x. Now, more than anything else, what I'm expecting is a massive, and I mean a massive, detail boost when we're using 8K with that new 4.3x telephoto. The 3x, if it doesn't really blow my mind, I wouldn't be all that disappointed, but that 4.3x really needs to do something. Now, obviously, before we go to details, there's something that I gotta talk about. This is something that I am hugely interested in and I'm hugely intrigued about for both phones: log video. Now, we already know the X200 Pro's log video is stunning. It is exceptional in the way it works. But what about the Xiaomi 15 Ultra? Because you see, there's something interesting going on. Now, if you have seen any of my videos about the Xiaomi 14 Ultra, you would have probably noticed that we don't have Master Cinema mode anymore on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. I would argue that Master Cinema mode in the previous generation was significantly better as opposed to the log video on the Xiaomi 14 Ultra, the previous one. In this case, however, because only log video is present, I'm hoping, genuinely hoping, that they improved log video to the point that we don't need Master Cinema anymore. And well, shooting this fairly challenging video with sort of a backlit situation going on, I would say the Xiaomi 15 Ultra's log video genuinely sucks balls. Well, it's not horrible, but comparatively speaking, just take a look at the X200 Pro. It has better detail preservation in the shadows, and I could not lift out any more detail on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. Believe me, I've done everything in my power to both handle those highlights and bring out more detail on the shadows on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. Nothing more can be done. This has been pushed to the limits as much as the log video will allow me to. And this is the best it can do. How sad is that? I had honestly hoped that they maybe learned from how good the Master Cinema mode was and then essentially implement some of that at the very least to make the log video better, but it seems like the opposite happened. They removed the one good feature that actually existed, and then the log video saw no improvement whatsoever basically. And of course, alongside that, we also have Dolby Vision video on both. Now, I would never recommend anyone to utilize Dolby Vision video on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra because you can't actually convert it to bloody SDR on the phone. You can easily do that on the X200 Pro, and it actually turns out exceptional, as you can probably tell. The dynamic range is fantastic, and the overall contrast exposure balance looks really nice, and the colors especially very natural, even as opposed to regular 4K video. So if you want particularly natural colors and really nice contrast, Dolby Vision video might be a really nice option right there. But on the Xiaomi, I converted it in post in DaVinci Resolve using color space transform. It's a lot of hoops to jump through that most people will not even want to bother with, and that's kind of the fact here. It's just so inconvenient, and on top of that, the dynamic range is not nearly as good as you would hope on the Xiaomi. That is just not worth using. Now, with all of that said and done, let us jump over to the details test, usually one of my favorite parts of the video. And this time along, well, I've got a lot riding on this. A lot of expectations, that is. Now, I did not make it easy for these phones. This is semi-backlit, as you can probably tell. Still, a good amount of light is falling on our subject here, so it's not unnecessarily difficult, but it's not particularly easy and ideal either. And with that said, we're gonna crop all the way in, and well, look at that. The X200 Pro is not focusing. I used to have to focus. It looked like it focused, and then it did not, apparently. The X200 Pro kind of has this issue where sometimes it just will not focus. Now, overall, I would say the details look very similar. It's kind of a little bit sharpened on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra, as odd as that sound, but I guess the X200 Pro is not all that far off. I mean, 4K 30, you can expect fairly nice quality on both. You're not really gonna have issues, to say the least, except for the X200 not focusing sometimes, even though you used to have to focus. But then we have 8K, which, let's face it, is something that is very usable on both phones, unlike 4K 60 on the X200 Pro. Like, sincerely, I take offense to the fact that we can't use 4K 60 on the X200. That's just damn. Anyways, I digress. Let's crop in. And would you look at that? This time it bloody focused. The X200 Pro, it likes to play games with me, is what I've discerned from all this. But the Xiaomi 15 Ultra, it actually lost detail as opposed to the 4K video. Well, I guess in a way it's not sharpening anymore. So it's not really lifting the details enough with 8K to make up for the fact that it's not sharpening. In a way, I guess you could say that if you want unsharpened and really natural looking video, then 8K is a nice way to go. But well, I was expecting a little bit more detail, similar to how we're getting more detail on the X200 Pro. That's not really the case on the Xiaomi. And then of course we have the ultra-wide camera. Now, with the ultra-wide, we are using the studio light just to make it a little bit easier. After all, it is the ultra-wide camera. It's the same light that's lighting me right now, so this is already really good and ideal condition for good detail preservation, or so I think. And well, with 4K, I'd say it's actually very similar, if not a little bit better, just a pinch better on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra, because it does seem to have a little bit more contrast and overall clarity. It's not sharpening particularly much, but it is bringing out a lot of details really well, as opposed to the X200 Pro. But then again, we have 8K on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. Now, the main camera was alright. I would say it had an interesting approach, one that some people will most definitely appreciate. Lack of sharpness is good, usually. But what about the ultrawide? Is the ultrawide 8K even worth using? And well, cropping all the way in and horrible. That's almost at the level of the 4K 60 that we had on the X200 Pro. I'm never letting that go. Look, the point is that 8K with the ultrawide camera, it's a really cool feature to have, but it doesn't work. So similar to how you're never going to use 4K 60 on the X200 Pro, you're probably never going to use 8K on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra because it sucks. It's that simple. I'm only talking about the ultrawide camera, obviously. Let's move on to the 3X, because the 3X also has 8K. Or so it says, at least in the camera UI and in the file size. But yeah, I'm not seeing a genuine amount of benefits. Like, yeah, sure, maybe a little bit less sharpening, but also a boatload of noise. That's not really a good sign. This was once again lit really bloody well. But somehow, for some reason, we're just not getting any good detail preservation, which is just disheartening once again. Like, what's the point of having 8K on all these cameras if they're not going to provide me with anything worthwhile? But well, I do have one last strand of hope. The 4.3x telephoto with 8K, that too. I'm genuinely hoping that it's worth something, because at this point, well, if that's not the case, man, I'ma start weeping. Well, thankfully we get much better detail preservation. This is Such a relief. But man, it's really sad, right? The fact that the ultra-wide 8K, which could have been so useful, that we can't even use it. It's completely worthless. And the 3x 8K is also just nothing special. There's nothing in there that's worth using. It's only with the 4.3x that I'm guessing both the optical zoom and the 8K that's really helping it out. It still has a ton of noise, which is sad, but well, at least once again, it's usable. Which is kind of a low bar if you think about it, but well, that's just a hand that we've been dealt. Now, speaking of nighttime video, the X200 Pro actually doesn't have any night mode video as such. The Xiaomi 15 Ultra does. You can use night mode video specifically on this, and the stabilization sucks. It doesn't suck, it's just worse than the X200 Pro, which is kind of sad because the X200 Pro stabilization isn't particularly the best out there. I think 4K 30 stabilization has improved a little bit on the X200, but I know for a fact that there are phones out there which can give you far better stabilization. Now the Xiaomi, despite the fact that it has night mode and the fact that it has worse dynamic range, alongside all of that, the worst stabilization really is a nail in the coffin, isn't it? So even without night video, the X200 is actually producing better results. That's quite something. And then last but not least, we have slow motion. Now this is a basic slow motion, the one that I honestly couldn't care less about. It is of course 1080p 240. It works really well. It looks really nice on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. I do enjoy the look that we get, the higher contrast. I don't know where this awkward little flicker or whatever is happening on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. It looks kind of odd, but well, what I can tell you is that the overall look is a little bit nicer. I wish the X200 had as much contrast as the Xiaomi. But naturally, slow motion just feels a lot better with 4K 120, doesn't it? I love the fact that it's just becoming mainstream now, and basically, well, almost all good phones have it. All good videography phones have it. And well, all I can tell you is that it looks bloody stunning on both. And even the X200 Pro, because of the sheer boost in detail you get with 4K 120, it looks a lot nicer that I don't even mind the slightly flatter look. It looks that much better as opposed to 1080p 240. And with that said, we are at the end of this comparison. I gotta admit, man, it really bothers me that we don't have proper stabilization with that 4K 60. I've said it multiple times already, but bloody hell, it's bad. But my second biggest disappointment with this particular comparison is the fact that log video on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra, it sucks. It's like we had good Master Cinema mode, and if you're gonna remove Master Cinema, might as well make sure that the log video is the best there is, or at least as good as something like the X200 Pro. I'm not expecting ProRes log level from the Xiaomi 15 Ultra, you know, that's something that Apple does and it's kind of special in its own way, but I just expect something that has good dynamic range and just, you know, doesn't screw me over in a slightly difficult lighting situation and blows out highlights, crushes shadows, and just doesn't really have any benefits, the best way to put it. But alongside that, once again, huge disappointment. I kind of expected this in the fact that 8K is not particularly good on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra, despite the fact that if you just look at the spec sheet, you're like, oh, 8K on every single camera. Impressive. At least that's what it sounds like, but that's not the case, as you probably saw. So, with all of that said, I guess both phones are at this point fairly good at 4K 30, fairly good at main camera 8K, fairly good with nighttime video, but they also have their problems, to say the least. Now, which problems you're willing to live with? Well, that's the decision you're gonna have to make. And so I'm gonna leave you up to it. I'll see you guys soon with more. Cheers.